Hello and welcome to our first of a series of podcasts that we will be producing from now on. My name's Chris Chapman and I'm here today to talk about CDM 2015. Been around for a while now, so we'll just have a quick review and see how things have progressed. Before we start, just a little bit about us. As I say, it's the Building Safety Group. We're the largest construction safety group within the UK. We operate throughout mainland UK. We're a not-for-profit organisation owned by our membership and run for the benefit of our membership. We're recognised by the HSE and we have close liaison with the HSE. We have over 800 member companies located throughout mainland UK. And we conduct over 18,000 site inspections every year. We look after 23,000 operatives. And we inspect 3,700 workplaces apart from construction sites throughout the year. And over 10,000 people attend our training courses each year. We're an Investors in People company. We carry the ISO 9001 for quality assurance, ISO 14001 for the environmental accreditation, and OSAS 18001, which is the occupational safety and health. We're a chartered building consultancy. We're a member of the Association for Project Safety. We're a member of ROSPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, and we're accredited to carry out construction skills training for the CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, including the Site Manager's Safety Training Scheme and the Site Supervisor's Safety Training Scheme. We also carry out NEBOSH National Construction Certificate Training and Examination. So that's a little bit about the Building Safety Group. Now we're on to the main subject. In today's agenda, we're going to have a quick review of CDM. It's been around since April 2015 now, so it's time to have a look. We'll look at the structure of the 2015 regulations and where it differed from the 2007 regulations, and look at the policy objectives of the regulation. Take a closer look at parts 2 and 3, which are the duty holders and responsibilities. A quick look at part 4, general requirements for all construction sites, which, to be honest, hasn't changed in any significant way from the 2007 regulations. We're going to have a look at the schedules because they're quite important, particularly Schedule 2, the minimum requirements for welfare. And then we'll have a look at how BSG can help you comply with these regulations. So since the first set of construction design management regulations were introduced to the UK in 1994, many parties involved in construction work, including businesses commissioning the work, have struggled with their statutory duties, and to be honest, CDM doesn't seem to have improved matters that much. For designers and contractors, CDM is part of the price of doing business. For clients, especially those procuring repair, refurbishment and maintenance work, the administrative duties can seem onerous, however great that organisation's commitment to health and safety at work is. CDM 2015 requires clients to take on more responsibilities for the formalities of these regulations, such as appointments and paperwork, even when there is only one contractor, and more projects now require formal processes than they did under the old regulations. This is one of the major changes that's taken place, and it's what the HSE refer to as strengthening the role of the client. So the structure of CDM 2015, very similar to the structure of CDM 2007, apart from its linear approach, which we'll look at in a moment. But in 5 parts, the same as 2007 was: an introduction, citation and commencement. It's basically the bits and how these regs came about. The citation, when it was read in Parliament, we really don't have to concern ourselves too much with that. But part 2, as you can see now, client's duties has its own section. So this is more of this in strengthening the role of the client. Part 3 are the health and safety duties and roles of all other responsible duty holders. And Part 4, as I said earlier, general requirements for all construction sites, which hasn't changed that much. Part 5 are the amendments, and we'll talk about those in a bit of detail when we get down there. Basically, it's where the changes have to be made in other regulations to comply with these. And the HSE has published some legal series guidance that supports CDM 2015 and explains it in more detail. And these series of guidances are available on our website. So as I say, this shows the linear approach to these regulations, whereas under the old 2007 regulations, we had the Part 2, which applied to all projects. Part 3 only applied to notifiable projects. These were the appointments of a CDM coordinator and a principal contractor. And then we had Part 4, as I say, which didn't change much, and Part 5 amendments. But that's gone now because it was confusing people. Some people thought if it wasn't notifiable, none of the regulations applied, which was never true. But this clears up any confusion, and it makes it quite clear that these regulations apply to all construction projects, regardless of their size and complexity. And Part 2, as I say, is the client, and the client's appointments and notification leads into Part 3, which is where we find the other duty holders, and Part 4, as I said before, the general requirements for construction sites. Well, this is a slide from the HSE's presentation to their own people to explain how the duties and roles and responsibilities cover the whole project from the immediate inception of the project right to the very end. The client has an overall commitment from start to finish, as you'd obviously expect, and the principal designer's role starts in the pre-construction phase and slowly finishes as the design becomes complete, and we move into the construction phase in full. And the principal contractor is then more responsible for everything involved to the completion of the project. CDM 2015 defines a client as anyone for whom a construction project is carried out, and these regulations apply to both domestic and commercial clients, whereas under the 2007 regulations, domestic clients were immune. But the clients are the head of the procurement chain and the major influence on the project standards and culture. But most clients, particularly those who only occasionally commission construction work, will not be experts in the construction process, and for this reason they're not required to take an active role in the management of the work, but they do have explicit duties. And the first of those duties are to make appointments, and where there is more than one contractor, or it is reasonably foreseeable that more than one contractor will be working on a project at any time, then the client must appoint in writing a designer with control over the pre-construction phase as principal designer, and a contractor as principal contractor with control over the construction phase. Regulation 6 talks about notifiable projects, and the criteria for notifiable projects now is the same as it was under 2015, 30 working days, but it now includes the proviso that there must be 20 people on the site at any one time throughout the period of construction, and if it doesn't reach that stage, then it has to exceed 500 person days to be notifiable to the HSE. And where it is notifiable, the client has the duty to give notice in writing to the executive as soon as is practicable before the construction phase begins. The notice must be clearly displayed in the construction site office in a comprehensible form that can be read by any worker engaged in construction work, and if necessary it must be periodically updated, but quite clearly a client's duty now. The client also has a duty to provide pre-construction information as soon as is practicable to every designer and contractor appointed or being considered for appointment to the project. And this pre-construction information can take all sorts of different forms. On a refurb, it could be an asbestos survey, and on a new build, it could be a ground condition survey. The client must also make arrangements for managing a project, including the allocation of sufficient time and other resources to ensure that the construction work is carried out, so far as is reasonably practicable, without risk to the health and safety of any person. The client also has a duty to take reasonable steps to ensure that the principal designer and principal contractor comply with their duties throughout the construction phase, and the client must ensure that before construction phase begins, a construction phase plan has been drawn up by the contractor for projects with only one contractor, or the principal contractor for projects with more than one contractor. The client also has a duty to ensure that the principal designer prepares a health and safety file for the project at the beginning. Whereas before, under the 2007 regulations, this was the duty of the CDMC. At the end of the project, that's now changed. It's the duty of the principal designer to prepare the health and safety file, but it's the duty of the client to make sure that that's being done. Regulation 7 is the application to domestic clients, and as I said earlier, the domestic clients are now included where they weren't under the other regulations. But Regulation 7 basically puts them back out of it, where it says the client is a domestic client. The Regulations 4, which is appointments, to 7 and 6, which is notification, must be carried out by the contractor for a project where there is only one contractor, or the principal contractor for a project where there is more than one contractor, or the principal designer where there is a written agreement that the principal designer will fulfill those duties. So in the normal course of events where nothing's been put in place, for a domestic client, the contractor or principal contractor takes on those duties. Regulation 8 is the general duties. A designer, including the principal designer, or a contractor, including the principal contractor appointed to work on a project, must have the skills, knowledge and experience, and if they are an organisation, the organisational capability necessary to fulfil the role that they are appointed to undertake, in a manner that secures the health and safety of any person affected by that project. So basically, this is a self-governing regulation where you have to make sure that you or your organisation has the relevant skills, knowledge, training and experience to undertake the task that you have been tasked with. Regulation 11 talks about the principal designer's role, which is the role to plan, manage and monitor the pre-construction phase and coordinate matters relating to health and safety during the pre-construction phase to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the project is carried out without risk to health or safety. The principal designer manages and coordinates the design stage of the project and has a duty to ensure that other designers comply with their duties under these regulations, and to cooperate with and support the client in providing pre-construction information and act as a conduit for information flow between duty holders. The principal designer also has a duty to ensure cooperation between designers to comply with their duties, prepare the health and safety file and issue it to the principal contractor should their appointment to the project end before the construction phase is complete. And from that point on, the principal contractor has to take on the responsibility for it. The principal designer duties apply regardless of the contractual arrangements for the appointment of other designers to the project. Should they be appointed by the client, for instance, the client has the duty to check that they have the relevant skills, knowledge and training and experience, but it's still the principal designer's duties to check that that designer has carried out their duties under these regulations. For instance, applied the principles of prevention to their design. But if the PD appoints other designers, then the PD must ensure that they have the relevant skills, knowledge, training and experience to deliver their work. And the designer's duties, a designer means any person, including the client, contractor or other person who in the course or furtherance of a business prepares or modifies a design. arranges or instructs any person under their control to do so. But the designer duties remain very similar to those under CDM 2007, with the change that a designer must not commence work in relation to a project unless satisfied that the client is aware of the duties owed by the client under these regulations. Whereas under the 2007 regulations, it was the designer's duty to make the client aware of those duties. It is now the duty to make sure the client is aware, not actually make them aware. So when preparing or modifying a design, the designer must take into account the general principles of prevention and any pre-construction information to eliminate, so far as is reasonably practicable, foreseeable risks to the health and safety of any person carrying out or liable to be affected by construction work, anyone maintaining or cleaning the structure post-construction, and anyone using the structure designed as a workplace post-construction. If it's not possible to eliminate these risks, the designer must, so far as is reasonably practicable, take steps to reduce, or if that's not possible, control the risks through the subsequent design process, and provide information about those risks to the principal designer and ensure that any information is included in the health and safety file. And the designer must take all reasonable steps to provide with the design information regarding any relevant assumptions made during the design process, such as temporary works or sequencing required, and sufficient information about the design, construction or maintenance of the structure to adequately assist the client, other designers and contractors to comply with their duties under these regulations. And that information should be project specific and have enough detail to give information to those who need it, and should include risks that could be difficult to manage, be unusual and not likely to be obvious to a competent contractor. So the principal contractor has a duty to manage, plan and monitor the construction phase and coordinate matters relating to health and safety during the construction phase to ensure that, so far as is reasonably practicable, construction work is carried out without risk to health or safety. And the principal contractor must ensure that a suitable site induction is given, necessary steps are taken to prevent access by unauthorised persons to the site, and that facilities that comply with the requirements of Schedule 2, welfare, are provided throughout the construction phase. And the principal contractor must make and maintain arrangements that will enable the principal contractor and workers engaged in construction work to cooperate effectively in developing, promoting and checking the effectiveness of measures taken to ensure the health, safety and welfare of workers on site. So this is the duty to consult and engage. Let's say consultation, it's two-way traffic, it's not toolbox talks or inductions which are considered training, but it's an open forum where an exchange of ideas can take place. So under the duties of contractors, and in this legislation subcontractors aren't referred to. It's either a contractor or the principal contractor, and what we talk about subcontractors working under a principal contractor, these are the rules and regulations that apply to them. So a contractor must not carry out construction work in relation to a project unless satisfied that the client is aware of the duties owed by the client under these regulations. It's the same proviso given to the designer. And where there is more than one contractor working on a project, a contractor must comply with any directions given by the principal designer or the principal contractor and the parts of the construction phase plan that are relevant to the contractor's work on the project. And if there's only one contractor working on a project, then that contractor must draw up the construction phase plan or make arrangements for a construction phase plan to be drawn up as soon as is practicable prior to setting up a construction site. And a contractor must not begin work on a construction site unless reasonable steps have been taken to prevent access by unauthorised persons to that site. And the contractor must ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, that the requirements of Schedule 2 are complied with so far as they affect the contractor or any worker under that contractor's control. So part 4, the general requirements for all construction sites, is quite a list of these, and we've just whipped through them. So 16 is the application of this part. Safe construction places of construction work, good order site security, stability of structures, demolition or dismantling, explosives, excavations, cofferdams and caissons, reports of inspections, energy distribution installations, prevention of drowning, traffic routes, vehicles, prevention of risk from fire, flooding or asphyxiation, emergency procedures, emergency routes and exits, fire detection and firefighting, fresh air, temperature and weather protection, and lighting. So, as I say, it's quite a long and comprehensive list, and this isn't the time to go through them, but the information is available in the guidance. More information in depth in the guidance and in the regulations, obviously. But as I say, haven't changed that much since the 2007 regulations, and the HSE are quite happy to prosecute under these regulations rather than refer back to the Health and Safety at Work Act Regulation 2, duties of employers, which is where they usually go. There have been some recent prosecutions under these regulations, particularly one quite recently under vehicles. So this is where they will be looking for breaches of these regulations to issue improvement notice, FFI, prohibition notice, or, as I say, prosecutions. So we've looked at the main parts of the regulations of the CDM regulations, and these are the schedules. And Schedule 1 is the particulars to be notified under Regulation 6, which is, we'll remember, is the criteria for notification to the HSE, and once we meet that criteria, there's certain information we have to give to the HSE, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. Schedule 2, we'll spend a little bit more time on that. It's the minimum welfare facilities required for construction sites, and it's important to remember that the first word there, minimum requirements. Schedule 3 is work involving particular risks. We'll have a short look at them. Won't spend too much time on the transitional and saving provisions because they've been done, and we'll have a look at an example of the amendments that have to be made to other legislation. So Schedule 1 is a list of the questions that need to be answered for notifying the HSE of the project. If it is notifiable, remember that's 30 working days and have more than 20 people on the site at any time during the construction phase, or a project that will exceed 500 person days. And the kind of information that's needed is the address where the site is, name of the local authority where the site is located, a brief description of the project, contact details of the main players, client, principal contractor, principal designer, planned start date of the project, and the time allocated by the client under Regulation 4. When we spoke about this, is now a requirement that the client gives sufficient time and other resources to the contractor from the point that he appoints the contractor to when construction work actually begins. The planned duration of the construction phase, amount of people on site at any one time, the planned number of contractors to be used, and the name and address of any contractor and designer and appointed. And last thing is the declaration signed by or on behalf of the client to make sure that the client is aware of the duties under these regulations. So Schedule 2, as I say, is the minimum welfare facilities required for construction sites, and includes sanitary conveniences, washing facilities, drinking water, changing rooms and lockers, and facilities for rest. So suitable and sufficient sanitary conveniences must be provided or made available at readily accessible places, and so far as is reasonably practicable, rooms containing sanitary conveniences must be adequately ventilated and lit. And so far as is reasonably practicable, sanitary conveniences and the rooms containing them must be kept in a clean and orderly condition. Separate rooms containing sanitary conveniences must be provided for men and women, except where and so far as each convenience is in a separate room, the door of which is capable of being secured from the inside. So basically, if you've got floor to ceiling partitions, then the sanitary conveniences can be within the same structure. But if, as the picture shows up on the top left there, we have 3/4 partitions, then they have to be in separate rooms. And the washing facilities were suitable and sufficient washing facilities, including showers, if required by the nature of work or for health reasons, must, so far as is reasonably practicable, be provided or made available at readily accessible places. And the washing facilities must be provided in the immediate vicinity of every sanitary convenience, whether or not also provided elsewhere, and in the vicinity of any changing rooms required by paragraph 4, whether or not provided elsewhere. And these washing facilities must include a supply of clean and hot or warm water, which must be running water so far as is reasonably practicable, soap and other suitable means of cleaning, and towels and other suitable means of drying. And rooms containing washing facilities must be sufficiently ventilated and lit, and washing facilities and the rooms containing them must be kept in a clean and orderly condition. The subject of subparagraph 6, separate washing facilities must be provided for men and women, except where they are provided in a room, the door of which is capable of being secured from the inside, and the facilities in each room are intended to be used by only one person at a time. And this subparagraph doesn't apply to facilities which are just provided for washing of hands, forearms and the face. So Schedule 3. Work involving particular risks lists work which puts workers at risk of burial under earth falls, engulfment in swampland, or falling from a height where the risk is particularly aggravated by the nature of the work or processes used, or by the environment of the place of work or site. So, as we know, there's normally a work at height risk on most sites, and it's not considered unusual or difficult to manage, but the site or location or the type of work being undertaken may up that risk. That's where this regulation will kick in, and it just requires you to take further precaution and extra care. And work which puts workers at risk from chemical or biological substances constituting a particular danger to the health or safety of workers, involving a legal requirement for health monitoring, such as asbestos removal, that kind of thing. And work with ionising radiation requiring the designation of controlled or supervised areas under Regulation 16 of the Ionising Radiation Regulations 1999. And you'll be aware if that is the case and the kind of work that you're undertaking comes under those regulations. Work near high voltage power lines comes under these regs. Work exposing workers to the risk of drowning. Work on wells, underground earthworks and tunnels. Work carried out by divers having a system of air supply. Work carried out by workers in caissons with a compressed air atmosphere. Work involving the use of explosives. And work involving the assembly or dismantling of heavy prefabricated components. So there's quite a comprehensive list there, and as I say, there's more control required for those under this schedule. Schedule 4, which is transitional and saving provisions. Well, to be honest, there was a 6-month grace period given. It started in April 2015 and ended in October 2015. So it's a matter of history now, and we don't need to dwell on it too much. And the saving provisions are just saving all parts of regulation, and there's no need to dwell on those too much either. In Schedule 5, as I say, it's a list of other regulations that would need amending to remain up to date with the new CDM regulations. So I thought just to show you an example of those. The Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations 1998 pure. In Regulation 6, you now have to put 31 or 32, substitute 22 or 23, as the numbers of the regulations that we looked at in CDM have changed. and for 2007 substitute 2015, and that's obviously the date change where it refers to the CDM regulations in pure. And there's a whole raft of regulations like this, and there's no point in having to rewrite all of those regulations just to make a few number changes. So in summary, CDM changes the focus onto the management of risk to the duty holders. The technical standards remain unchanged, strengthening the role of the client, making the client more accountable for what they have commissioned, and domestic clients' duties taken on by the PD or the PC. Construction phase plan required for all projects, but it's important to remember proportionality when we're talking about this. The HSE publish a template for a CPP for a small job, which is 2 pages, and one of those pages is guidance on how to fill it in, and this is also available from our website. It's also a duty to embed better standard involvement with the workforce. There was a requirement for that in 2007, and the 2015 regulations just beef this up a little bit more. The changes to notifications and the trigger for appointments we saw, and we have a duty to work with the industry to get the message out to all parts of the industry, and it also provides a clearer and easier way to hold all duty holders to account. And as I say, the HSE have already carried out some prosecutions under these regulations where there have been material breaches. So how can BSG help? Well, we understand that principal designers, principal contractors and clients will need a support mechanism in place to meet their obligations under these regulations. And that's why BSG have created the role where we can act as an appointed CDM compliance consultant to help all parties fulfil their legal requirements on a project. And it's an oversight and overview of the whole project and involving all parties, and this is the whole drive of these regulations, is to try and make it a more holistic approach to the whole project. As I say, the HSE are saying, a construction project isn't just the construction phase, and this is something we all need to take on board, really. We also offer a one-day course designed for company employees who will already understand the roles of their own company on construction projects. And the aim of the course is to ensure that delegates are aware of the legal duties placed upon clients, principal designers, principal contractors and contractors under the CDM 2015 regulations. As I say, the details of that, again, are available on our website. There's also our helpline for members. The number's on your screen now, 0300 304 9070. I man the help desk and always happy to give advice and help and guidance where I can. And my email address is shown on the bottom there, chrisc@bsgltd.co.uk. So in closing, just a short message from the HSE. The HSE is saying there'll be no changes to their approach to inspection, investigation and enforcement. It will not be FFI driven. Quite at pains to point that out. They're looking for risk-based, sensible and proportionate documentation, but they will be looking beyond the site gate where failure to manage risk occurs. They'll be looking at clients and designers. And just a reminder, there's a construction phase plan required for all sites regardless of size or complexity. Thank you for listening to our podcast. I hope you found it informative and of some use. It is the first of ours on. We will be doing some in the near future. Do look out for those. But thank you for your time today.